And the yellow jacket. The yellow jacket, this guy here, this time of year they want that sugar that's in the honey and probably trying to steal some. It's cool to see that some of them are actually out today. So I started working at the Outback in the spring of 2011, and at that point we had kind of a number, I think there were 3 or 4 people in the community that were keeping bees here. But there was no real organization between beekeepers and no real educational opportunities for students. So we had, over the winter of 2011 and 2012, we had like a pretty massive bee die-off at the Outback. Poor care, and I mean, it's hard to keep bees. I think this past winter, about 50% of hives in the US died over the winter. It's a combination of factors, and in recent years there's been all this concern about like colony collapse disorder. Kind of this nebulous cause for winter bee death and colony collapse that's really gotten a lot of press in the last few years. And as far as we know, it's not any one thing, like one disease or one environmental factor that's causing the bee death. It's more of a combination between all these different stresses and pressures on bees. If it's cold out and then also it's wet, like we have here, wet weather is really challenging for bees. Then also maybe they have varroa mites, which is a parasitic mite that was introduced in the 80s. And then maybe they have nosema or some other varroa mites are native, I believe, to Southeast Asia. And so there are local varieties of honey producing bees there that have evolved to live with the varroa mite. I don't know, we live in an era where commercial beekeeping is a big thing, and so there's a lot of just global movement of bees. In commercial beekeeping, hives are transported all over, and you'll have migratory beekeepers that will go to Washington for apple pollination, and then down to California for almonds, and then somewhere else for blueberries, and somewhere else for raspberries, and it's like really stressful for the bees.
Yeah.
And so they'll give them pollen patties and high fructose corn syrup, and oftentimes you can give them corn syrup and take the honey since it's worth a lot more than corn. In all that transport, bee diseases have spread. There are tons of native bees here, and tons of native pollinators, but honeybees are native to the old world. There are some varieties, some species. I think Melipona is the genus, but there's like a Central American honeybee that was even cultivated by indigenous people in Central America. Honeybees that we keep here, Apis mellifera, is totally introduced. Some introduced species can have a really beneficial niche in an ecosystem, and I think honeybees do that. But they're not native here. Lorenzo Lorraine Langstroth discovered that bees naturally, when they build comb, leave like just about a 3/8 inch space between combs. So he took that idea of bee space and created these box hives that have 10 frames, and then we're able to just kind of take each frame out and look at the bees and see how they're doing. There's a lot of, being a beekeeper, you're definitely not, you don't just kind of let the bees do their thing. There's, especially with all the diseases that late summer or early fall, to take off those shallow boxes and take out the frames, cut off the wax seal, and use like a centrifuge to extract the honey. And generally, I mean, we weigh the hives to make sure that there's enough honey in here, but generally 2 deep boxes will have enough room also for honey to get a hive through the winter. It takes a lot of work. It's really rewarding work. Not really. Commercial beekeeping inherently puts huge amounts of stress on the bees. Most commercial beekeepers make their money off of pollen contract. Farmers will pay them to bring in the bees, and they get paid per hive to just set a hive up and let the bees pollinate a crop. It means that the bees are getting, like, at any given time, a totally homogeneous diet. Like, they're only getting almond nectar and pollen for a while. I mean, they're getting like put on semi-trucks and moved all the time. But I think that that's a big part of the reason that we have die-offs. I mean, I don't think it's really a sustainable way to keep bees. There's almost no local queen raising in northern climates. Usually people buy like a package of bees if they want a new hive. Oftentimes the bees are just taken out of hives in Southern California where they get like early brood production. The queen is already mated with a drone, which is the male bee. So she goes on her mating flight first thing before she starts laying eggs. I mean, she's essentially just like not producing bees that are fit to live here. We wind up dealing with like this unsustainable cycle where bees die in the winter, you order new packages in the spring, the bees aren't really genetically fit to live here, and then they die again over the winter and people order new bees. It's so much bigger than just the bees. It's like we have a system of giant scale monocrop agriculture. The problem is it has a lot of other costs that we didn't necessarily take into account. I mean, if we all grew a lot of our own food and we all had a few beehives and we all had these really diverse food producing landscapes like here at the Outback where there's tons of crops grown in this small area, I think we would avoid a lot of the problems. To imagine everyone growing their own food in this kind of situation is a really radical shift from where we're at. I don't really know how like sustainable beekeeping and industrial agriculture
can mesh together. The two need to like
They're,
move together to be able to make a difference.
yeah. For example, like it's illegal to keep honeybees in a skep, which is like a traditional woven hive. It's illegal to keep honeybees in any kind of hive that you can't inspect frame by frame. But the reason for that is just that if you have a hive that you can't inspect, there's a potential for it to be like a disease vector. Also, some urban areas that have laws pertaining to beekeeping, it is really fun to like try different honeys. The honey from here, I mean, like maybe I'm kind of biased, but the honey from here is like hands down the best honey I've ever had. There's tons of blackberries around here, which produce huge amounts of nectar. They're super invasive. Like I hate Himalayan blackberry, but I do like that they're a big nectar source for bees. Honey from here is like this really rich floral taste that like I've never tasted anything quite like it. In Hawaii, I just had honey that was from coffee and coconut. I've had honey in El Salvador that was like almost tasted like it didn't even taste good. It just had like a kind of foul taste to it that I think was just from the nectar. Like the honey is fine, it doesn't go bad. It's kind of sad to go to the store and see, like grade A clover honey. It's pretty boring once you've had some really good honey.